Good evening. I'm Michelle Sturgis of the NAACP. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the News Gazette, I welcome you to tonight's candidate forum. Tonight's forum is for the Democratic primary office of Alderman Ward 1, City of Urbana. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are unfortunately not presenting this forum in person. We have received many questions for these forums. Similar questions which have been submitted have been grouped together. And consequently, your question may not be asked in precisely the way you submitted it. Due to the limited time, we may not be able to get to all the submitted questions. After the forum, this video will be available on the League's YouTube channel and Facebook page after January 12th. It will also be broadcast by UPTV. The UPTV schedule is available on the City of Urbana website. I will be the moderator for this forum. The order for candidates is alphabetical. Therefore, Jake Fava will open and Mary Alice Wu will close. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement. I will then ask questions submitted prior to the forum, and candidates will each have 1 minute to answer these questions. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Candidates will kindly refrain from any negative attacks on the other candidate, will not mention the other candidate by name, and will speak only to what they plan to do if elected to office. Mr. Fava will begin his opening statement.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle. Hello, everybody. My name is Jake Fava. I'm excited to be here running for alderman. I'm somewhat of a recent transplant to Urbana, just having moved here 6 years ago, but I've quickly put down roots in the community, and I intend to make this city my home for a long time. My motivations for running for office really come down to having spent the last few years developing a deeper understanding of my own privilege and the ways being a white, heterosexual, cis man from a middle-class background has protected me from many of the injustices so many of our fellow Americans experience. Being elected to public office would allow me to use my own platform and voice to elevate the voices of disenfranchised and marginalized communities and fight against the systems that lock individuals into cycles of oppression. The 3 issues I will prioritize most are generational poverty, so that being a lack of opportunities for upward social mobility that keeps families stuck in poverty generation after generation, housing insecurity, everything from rent burden, which affects over 2/3 of Champaign County residents, to actual homelessness. There are thousands of vacant rental units in the county, but people who are homeless can spend years on the Housing Authority waitlist. And then finally, police reform. It's more clear than ever that police departments are unable to uphold justice in a way that's equitable to all members of the public, indicated most directly in Urbana by the brutalization of Aaliyah Lewis last year. It's now time to really think about what issues we want our police force to be dealing with and where funds could be better invested into the community to address the root causes of crime instead of its effects. Although I'm relatively new to the political sphere, having spent the last year as a precinct committee person, I believe my work as a qualitative design researcher for the University of Illinois, where I work on projects to understand the student experience in an effort to improve it for everyone, particularly students from low-income and marginalized backgrounds, will help me approach policymaking with a human-centered lens, keeping empathy at the heart of every decision. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Wu.
First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the Champaign County News Gazette for this forum tonight. I was born and raised in Champaign-Urbana. My parents met here on campus in the 1960s, and they participated in the social movements of the time, both in the anti-war demonstrations as well as the voting rights movement. Both had an active role in shaping my viewpoints. My dad participated in the original 1965 Selma March, and I was inspired by these foot soldiers when I accompanied him on the 50th anniversary. I moved permanently to Urbana when I was 19. I've lived here for 30 years, and I've raised both of my kids here. My education was at Parkland University of Illinois, where I earned an associate's, a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD, all in sociology. This education taught me the benefits of using data tempered by the lived experiences of communities to make decisions. I currently hold 2 positions at the University of Illinois, where I'm the director of data analytics and also an adjunct professor in sociology. My interest in city government was first spurred by a proposed development on the corner of Lincoln and Nevada. I started by canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors to let people know what was being proposed. Our neighborhood rallied together in strong opposition to this planned unit development. After several planning commission meetings, resubmitted proposals, this building was ultimately built without any zoning variances. During my term on city council, I've worked with council to achieve fiscal responsibility with a balanced budget, increased pension contributions, long-term capital planning. I've advocated for a new comprehensive plan, something that has just started this year. I've worked to balance new development and residential needs. For example, zoning changes now come before the committee of the whole instead of the council for a vote, giving residents more time to have their voice heard. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, candidates. Now we will begin our questions. Question for Jake Fava. Why is the city of Urbana important to you? How will Ward 1 and the city as a whole made better because of your service on the city council?
Excellent. Great question. Thank you, Michelle. So I'd say, what does Urbana mean to me? The past few years, like I mentioned in my opening statement, I've been putting down roots primarily in the arts communities. So I participate in the local open mic, and I'm a musician, as well as the local theater scene. And actually, most recently, I've taken over running the Canopy Club open mic. It used to be run by Mike Ingram. So it's through that I've met a lot of people in the community from a lot of different walks of life and been exposed to a lot of the issues that, as I mentioned, were new to me, things that I hadn't experienced myself. So I think really what a vote for me or what me being in office would look like for Urbana is prioritizing those folks that are at the bottom, those folks who are low income, from marginalized communities. Because really, as Marcus Aurelius said, what helps the hive helps the bee. And what we can improve for those folks, we can improve for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question, Ms. Wu.
Okay, hopefully I remembered all the parts of the question.
And I'll be happy to repeat it. Thank you.
That'll be wonderful.
Why is the city of Urbana important to you? That's the first part. Second part, how will Ward 1 and the city as a whole made better because of your service on the city council?
So the city of Urbana is really close to my heart. I was born here in this community. I had an opportunity to have my kids in the public schools where they went to the neighborhood schools. And I've really enjoyed my time here as a resident. I feel like the diversity within our community, the people from all over the world, makes us stronger, makes us a better community. I love the farmers market. I love the downtown. I think that the resources that we have available in terms of amenities are excellent. Of course, they can always be worked on, but it's definitely a good building block. In terms of what people can expect from me, I try and listen to everybody's voices when they come to me with a question. I have people asking me questions such as, a tree branch fell down on my street. I take that just as seriously as having somebody run into their yard and having the police in their yard. So it doesn't matter what kind of topic comes my way, all of those concerns are taken seriously by me.
Thank you. Next question. Mr. Fava, what unaddressed issues in Ward 1 are priorities to you? Second part of that question is, what issues are your priorities for the city as a whole?
Excellent. So as far as, I'll answer the second part first. As far as the city as a whole, I think two of the points that I mentioned in my opening statement would probably be the most important, that being housing insecurity, both everything from rent burden to actual homelessness. and police brutality and major police reform. In terms of Ward 1, obviously Ward 1, part of the campus area, separated from some of the poorer areas where these are bigger issues. Most of the things that I've talked to folks about in the ward have concerned the well-being of everybody in the city, so our poorest members. But also, I think something that's specific to Ward 1, we definitely have some of the worst roads in Urbana, and that's something that impacts everybody who drives. So that's what I would say for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mrs. Wu. Same question. What unaddressed issues in Ward 1 are priorities for you? Second part of the question is, what issues are your priorities for the city as a whole?
So I think one of the biggest challenges with Ward 1 is that we are a residential neighborhood that abuts the University of Illinois campus. And I say that's a challenge because there's lots of changes that have been happening in construction. And so there's a lot of concerns to make sure that the quality of our neighborhood is maintained while we still allow for growth and smart development within our neighborhood. And so a lot of concerns that I hear from people is that they want to have more input into development as it comes on board through the city. In terms of the rest of the city, I think that it actually is the same. So there is a lot of growth that's going on in both the Champaign and Urbana area. And we need to be very careful about how we manage all that growth, which is why I'm really excited that we're going to have this comprehensive plan coming up. And it's really important to me that we have all the different diverse groups that we have. We have students, we have homeowners, we have people from all over the world who live in our communities. We have Orchard Downs. All of these people need to have a voice in what their vision is for the city.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. This one, it looks like it's a 2 to 3 part question. So here you go. Do you know how the city defines problem properties? Do you know how the city defines problem properties and what the city does to deal with them? Second part, are there any designated properties? And then the next part, how can landlords be held accountable? Need me to read it again?
No, I'm good.
Got it?
Well, I would have to say problem properties, not a term I'm familiar with, unfortunately. So I'm sorry about that. I would guess either it has to do with a vacant rental lot, like we have many of in Champaign County, or perhaps it has something to do with the quality of the construction, or something like that. Were the other parts? What should landlords do about it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I think with any problem, it's important to gather perspectives from everybody that's involved. So when we're dealing with any sort of property, the stakeholders aren't just the people who own that property and the people who set regulations about that property. It's also the folks who are suffering because that property isn't being used, or because that property isn't being used to its fullest potential. So I'd say the biggest thing would be not just considering the needs of the people who own those property and the policymakers who are in charge of that, but also the members of our community who are being impacted by it.
Same question, Ms. Wu. It's a 3-part question. Here you go. Do you know how the city defines problem properties and what the city does to deal with them? Second part, are there any designated problem properties? And the last part, how can landlords be held accountable?
So problem properties, I think, really came into the conversation under the Silver Water area. And in that area, there was a lot of trash outside. There was broken lights. There were different things that were basically not illuminated. And so there was a lot of crime in the area. And so what the city did was they went through and they started to cite the landlord. And when they cited the landlord, if they didn't actually attend to the problems that they were getting cited for, then the city actually took them to court and started to charge them fees, and then ultimately would put a lien on their property. So basically what happens is if there are problem properties in regards to the number of violations that they have, there's a committee that's pulled together. And that committee is the mayor, the community development group, and the police department. They start talking about all the issues that they've had around that different property. Once they have an idea, a better idea of what's going on, that's when they start trying to figure out if they're going to do fines, if they're going to write violations of them, and it keeps getting escalated.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Mr. Fava, what do you believe should be the balance of power between the mayor's office and the city council? Second part of that question, how should policies be developed?
Excellent. In terms of the balance of power, I think generally speaking, I'm in favor of the distribution of power as much as possible. Obviously, on a city council, each alderman is meant to represent the constituents of their particular ward. And if the voices of those residents and their representatives, the aldermen, are being drowned out or the efforts are being stopped by a mayor, I think that's something that we need to change. In terms of how policy should be developed, I think collaboratively is a word that comes to mind, with as much input as possible. And that I think includes going out and getting direct, focused input. One thing that I would love to do if I am elected to alderman, is conduct one-on-one, I'll call them interviews, because that's what we call them at work, but conversations with my constituents in an effort to understand what are the actual experiences that they're having and the specific issues that they experience. I think those types of getting those voices into the picture and not just in the 2-minute or 3-minute public input box that people are allowed to use is something that is really important. I'd like to move forward with.
Okay. Same question. Mrs. Wu.
So I think this is an excellent question in terms of shared power between the city council and mayor. Obviously, the mayor kind of runs the day-to-day operations and kind of oversees all the different departments. City council is there really to have a voice and to represent the citizens' needs and wants. And we're there to pass resolutions and ordinances that would then guide how the city is operated. So the mayor's job really is to kind of implement, but it is a shared governance model. And I think that there was a second part to that question, and I've already forgotten it. I apologize.
Yes. How should policies be developed?
Thank you. In my time on city council, it's been really interesting because we've had policies that come to us from staff, from the mayor, from city council members, from the public. And I think this is great. I think everybody should have the ability to offer up ideas for policy, and we should all take those seriously. So I guess at the end of the day is I hope everybody is able to shape policy because it affects everybody.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How can residents concerned about sustainable, appropriate preservation and development that is compatible with older homes be involved in the process of approving appropriate developer projects?
So I mean, I not knowing the nitty gritty details of how some of these processes work. This is something that I would have to catch up on if I was elected to the role. But I would say, generally speaking, that it's important that that it's not just considering. I mean, it's important that we put the environment first. And that we're enacting sustainable practices and development, but at the same time, it's really important to understand the unique circumstances that folks that may be living in these older homes are experiencing themselves. And so again, I think this is another place where it's focusing on those individual experiences, those one-to-one conversations, and talking about what people actually what their lives are like. And what challenges they might be facing to sustainable development, and keeping those considerations in mind in any sort of policy that goes through. Thank you.
Okay. Same questions, Ms. Wu, and I'll read it to you again. How can residents concerned about sustainable, appropriate preservation and redevelopment that is compatible with older homes be involved in the process of approving appropriate developer projects?
So in my mind, there's really two main ways that a constituent or a resident could be involved in this. The first one is they could be part of the Historical Preservation Committee. There's a Sustainability Committee. There's a planning unit, there's a planning committee and a zoning committee. So we rely on people to volunteer for these different committees. And it would be great if people are interested that they apply to them. But to the broader question in terms of the overall public's participation, one of the things that I've been working on is looking at the zoning law, because I've been concerned that there have been proposals that have come up in front of the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission without any kind of public meeting. And so one of the things that I'm looking to do is to actually change the zoning law to mandate that any of these developments have a public meeting before they go before the plan development or the zoning board. In addition, I would like to have actually a requirement that people put in, how are they going to be sustainably using sustainable building materials? So I'd like to make that as part of whatever plan unit development proposal comes in front of the planning board.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Fava. What is your plan regulating construction and design so as to improve the aesthetics of projects? And then there's another part on this question. What can be done without the regulations regarding climate change?
Okay, so the first part about aesthetics, I would say, I mean, that's largely a subjective conversation, certainly. And I mean, what could be considered aesthetically appealing architecturally to one person could be completely different to somebody else. So I'd say the biggest thing, this is maybe again a case where we need more public input. We need more conversations with constituents, people that are going to be living in an area where development is being proposed, to get their input on what types of choices they'd like to see. And then the other half, was it what can be done without climate regulation? Was that what it was?
It's what can be done within the regulations regarding climate change.
Oh, okay. Well, there's plenty of places where I mean, we know that most of emissions and most of pollution is committed by large companies, and it's not down to the individual. So I'd say the biggest thing for this is focusing on regulations we can pass to companies that are and to larger corporations that have buildings and operations within Urbana and the surrounding area, rather than focusing on individual responsibility.
Thank you. Ms. Wu, what is your plan for regulating construction and design so as to improve the aesthetics of projects? That's the first part. The second part of the question, what can be done within the regulations regarding climate change?
So right now, the city of Urbana has two design areas. One is the Lincoln-Busey corridor, which goes from Illinois to Pennsylvania, and then from Lincoln to Busey. In addition, they have the Historic East Design Review Board. So these design review boards have a lot of guidelines in terms of the look and feel of the different buildings that are put into these specific areas. And one of the things that I'm working on is to make sure that any proposed buildings actually come before those design review boards before they go to city council, because I don't want them to be approved, right, until the design of it is approved. So I'm working towards making that change. And then in terms of climate change, as I mentioned before, I would like to see more emphasis on sustainable building material, have that being included in any proposed developments. And the city does have a lot of programs going on right now. So we have the Municipal Aggregation Program, which helps cut down on carbon. We also have the solar farms that we are doing at the Landscape Recycling Center. And finally, we also have a solar purchase program.
Okay, thank you. Next question for Mr. Fava. What do you think will be your biggest challenge if you are elected?
Ooh, biggest challenge. So I think based on what I've been seeing in city council meetings, I've watched every meeting on YouTube for the past several months. I think the biggest thing that I would want to push for that I think might get pushback within the council or resistance within the council would have to do with our police reforms. I think we have lots of examples of places where police funds have been reallocated into the community in plenty of other comparable cities across the country, and the results have been great. They're reducing crime. The people are happier. It's better for everyone. And a lot of what I've seen from the Urbana City Council so far has been Band-Aid solutions, so to say, like bringing in the NAACP for the principals. I remember that, mostly a symbolic gesture. This most recent resolution that was passed around changing the police routes. When I see something like that, it seems to me it's really more something that it's more of a situation where the city of Urbana Police and specifically Chief Seraphim is not willing to accept that there may be bias in his police force and is instead trying to attribute the disproportionate policing to other causes like the routes. So that would I say that the biggest challenge would be fighting for things like that and specifically police reform.
Thank you. Ms. Wu, same question. What do you think will be your biggest challenge if you are elected?
Well, I'd have to agree. I think that the biggest challenge is really reshaping our public safety. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a very hard process, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a very worthwhile process. One of the things that I've been advocating for is a change in our use of force policy. I've been looking to get more community involvement in terms of having a community member on the use of force committee. I'd like to see some of the tasks that the police force do actually move off of their plate. I'd like to have crisis intervention people who are allocated, who are sent based on a different calls for service instead of the police force. And we are starting that program hopefully at the beginning of next year. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. It's a pilot program, and it's something that we're going to have to work really hard to make sure that we get right for our community.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Fava. If the budget has to be cut due to reduced revenues, where do you think the cut should fall?
Well, I mean, the first part is, continuation of my last answer. I mean, a large proportion of the budget for Urbana has been on police, more than anything else. So that would probably be the first place. And then the second place, I would love to advocate for the reducing of salaries or stipends of some positions within the city government. That's another place where there's a lot of expenses for a lot of folks, and it may not be a fair, a just compensation for the amount of work that many of those folks are doing. So those would be the two places. I think the police budget, number one, but then also looking at salaries and stipends for those holding public office.
Thank you. Same question, Ms. Wu. If the budget has to be cut due to reduced revenues, where do you think the cut should fall?
Well, this is a hard question because we spent the past 3 years cutting the budget. So all the easy things that we could cut have hopefully been done. I think that we're going to have to be very strategic in terms of where we cut our funds. I do agree that we need to look hard at our public safety model in terms of trying to figure out just how much money and what type of support staff we need. And one of the things that we've done is we have the human relations coordinator. One of the things that I would like to see is that we move some of the services, potentially adding social workers and so forth, that would alleviate some of the duties of the police and also at the same time allowing us to be more responsible with our budget. So that would be one area that I would look at. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to buckle down and we're going to have to look at everything because there is nothing that's not off the table.
Thank you. Next question. This is actually a two-part question. How will you make the city affordable and safe? Second part, are there specific things Urbana can do in regards to long-term renters?
Excellent. So the first part, keeping Urbana affordable and safe, I think a big place, as I spoke a little bit about in the opening statement, is definitely in housing insecurity. Over 2/3 of Champaign County residents are rent burdened, which means they spend more than 1/3 of their income on rent. Um, and if that's one place where if we had more programs for subsidized housing or programs like the Cunningham Township does with rent assistance and general assistance, things like that. That's a very obvious place where we can start helping our poorest residents live a life that's more affordable for them. Um, and I think in turn, poverty is the single greatest predictor of crime. I think that's the first place we need to look if we want to make our community safer, is how can we alleviate poverty. And then to the second part, which of course I've already forgotten. Do you mind repeating it again, Michelle? I'm sorry.
Yes, the second part of the question, is that what you were talking about that?
Yes.
Oh, well,
But actually,
looks like time's up.
That's all right. That's all right.
Thank you. Thank you. Same question, Ms. Wu. How will you make the city affordable and safe? Second part of the question, are there specific things Urbana can do in regards to long-term renters?
So in terms of affordable and safe, I think that the city has been working on building more, working with developers to build more affordable housing. And that's something that we should continue on and we should expand upon. In terms of being safe, I think we have to remember that part of the reason that we have neighborhoods that might be more rundown than other neighborhoods. And we need to ensure that our sidewalks, the lighting, that all those things are equitable throughout Urbana. And we actually are getting ready to take an evaluation of some of those areas to see if we can make them safer with lighting and with sidewalks. In terms of specifics for long-term renters, I guess I unfortunately at the moment, I don't have any ideas off the top of my head in terms of, did you say make it more affordable for long-term renters?
It says, are there specific things Urbana can do in regards to long-term renters?
Oh, and my time is up.
And your time is up. Thank you. Okay. This is our last question for tonight. Looks like it's a three-part question. Okay. So the first part says, what do you think Urbana should do to address issues of racial injustice? Address specifically review of police, school resource officers, and police misconduct. Last part, have you had any personal experiences that have shaped your views on criminal justice? Mr. Fava, go first.
So, excellent. Thank you. So for the first part, addressing racial injustice, I think the two biggest places where we see a lot of discrimination based on race, one that's already been discussed tonight, of course, in the treatment of residents by police, police brutality, but also treatment of black residents at every level of the justice system. So that would be one first place. In addition, another place that a lot of racial discrimination happens is in housing. So there are many of the leasing agencies in Urbana have questions on their applications which they are not legally allowed to ask, for example, about felonies. So that's another place where there's really some direct things actions we can start taking right now and reduce some of that discrimination. In terms of review of police, obviously we already have the Civilian Police Review Board. I think I'd just like to see more opportunities for members of the public to participate in that. And then personal experience, I'll just say one thing. I've had a lot of interactions, especially in the past couple years, with folks with criminal records and felonies. And I think the biggest thing it's opened my eyes to is the amount of discrimination and challenges that a lot of those folks face because of something that they did maybe decades ago. And so that's one concrete place where I think I've had my views shaped on criminal justice.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fava. Ms. Wu, same question. What do you think Urbana should do to address racial issues of racial injustice? Second part of the question, address specifically review of police, school resource officers, and police misconduct. And last part of that question, have you had any personal experiences that have shaped your views on criminal justice?
So one of the things that I think that this country is finally grappling with is the war on drugs. And we recently legalized marijuana, and there's been some revenue that's been generated from that. Unfortunately, we still have people in jail for distribution of marijuana. But luckily, those are getting expunged. A lot of them are getting expunged. So I would like to see some of the resources that we get based on marijuana sales be put back into the communities of color. I would like to see us start to invest more money into those businesses to help those startup businesses. In terms of the review of the police, this is definitely a topic that is at the top of mind of everybody. And there are different rules that we have to adhere to, and I would like to see the city push as hard as we can to ensure that our police are held accountable to a high standard that we expect them to be. And so that process is ongoing right now, but I fully support what we can do to achieve that goal. And last but not least, what experience has impacted me personally. I was fortunate to be chosen as a juror on a murder trial a couple of years ago. And this experience actually really taught me how the justice system was working. It was a pretty big trial. I actually was the alternate juror on that. And the person was acquitted because the state couldn't prove their case. And that really had a big impact on me, seeing how that case went through.
Thank you. It is now time for closing statements. Mr. Fava, you are first.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. So I just wanted to say a lot of what I talked about today and what I believe in, sometimes perceived as so-called radical ideas or extreme ideas. I really think that the majority of residents in America, and also specifically in Urbana, are in favor of things like defunding the police, better social safety nets, taking actionable steps towards addressing housing insecurity. Really, I think the largest barrier to a lot of this change is the rampant spread of misinformation. We're not all always working from the same set of facts. And it's not anyone's fault. Every single person is susceptible to media manipulation and propaganda. If we weren't, then the U.S. government and corporations wouldn't be spending billions of dollars on it every year. But when hearsay and misinformation is allowed to reverberate in echo chambers, like we see happening a lot on the internet in particular, it can lead to really disastrous results. And I think the example of the domestic terrorist assault on the Capitol yesterday is a prime example of that. So I think the biggest thing that I hope to leave folks with is that maybe to question why you have some of the beliefs that you do, and to look at where you're getting your information. And that's something that I hope, if elected, and also over the course of the next couple months or so, is going to be my largest pushes towards trying to inform folks of the issues that are going on, and the gravity of those issues, and the actionable steps that we can take to start addressing them. So with that, I'll thank everybody who's watching this for your time and for watching us. The League of Women Voters, NAACP, and thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wu, you're next. Closing statement.
Thank you. I've had the privilege of serving and representing Ward 1 for the past 3 years. Ward 1 is part of the university campus, as well as one of the last neighborhoods in the area within close proximity to the U of I. My focus has always been on representing Ward 1 concerns with a particular focus on smart development to maintain the residential feel of our neighborhood. In addition, I have worked judiciously, scrutinizing city finances. I've also worked with the city and Cunningham Township Social Service Grant Committee, where I've advocated for funds to address homelessness, access to healthcare information, food insecurity, and youth development. I've really enjoyed my time on the city council. There's a lot that we still need to be doing. If re-elected, I want to work towards a more equitable and responsive Urbana public safety model, which reflects our values. I want to work towards having more youth participation in government. I will continue to work on smart development with the strong participation from the public in the new comprehensive plan, as well as changes in our zoning laws for more public information. I will continue to work on fiscal responsibility to ensure that Urbana resources are used wisely. Together with my colleagues on City Council, I'm proud to have carved out from our existing budget over $200,000 for new public safety initiatives. In my experience as a sociologist, a manager, and a mom, I've learned that listening is imperative and taking into consideration multiple viewpoints is the only way that we can really truly achieve our goals. I work collaboratively with my neighbors, council members, the mayor, and city staff, and I hope to continue that for the next 4 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, candidates. Thanks again to the League of Women Voters of Champaign County, the NAACP, and the News Gazette for sponsoring this forum. Thanks to our timer, Jonna Von Behrens tonight. She's kept us on schedule. Thank you very much. Also a very special thank you once again to Jonna Von Behrens, who put the series of forum together. So we appreciate you very much, Jonna. Just a reminder, it's not too late to register to vote for the February 23rd primary. Information is available on the county clerk's website. Please vote by mail, vote early, or vote on February the 23rd. Because turnout is expected to be light, please check your polling place for February the 23rd. So please vote. We will now take a short break. Our next forum will be for Alderman Ward 2.